pregnant wife returned from the hospital only to find the millionaire living happily with his mistress. Caroline Rutherford's heart pounded the moment she stepped out of the hospital. After months of treatments to save her high-risk pregnancy, she expected a tender homecoming with her beloved husband, Richard, a man whose empire stretched from the glistening skyline of New York to opulent villas in the French Riviera. Yet, upon arriving at the grand marble foyer of their mansion, Caroline realized her world was about to collapse in an unimaginable way. Laughter echoed from upstairs, laughter that wasn't hers. Suspicion turned into dread. Never could she have imagined that while she fought for her unborn child's life, her millionaire husband found comfort in someone else's arms. Caroline Rutherford stood under the great chandelier that crowned the foyer of the Rutherford mansion. The house she once considered her castle now felt oppressive. She clutched a small medical discharge note against her chest. In her other hand, she balanced a bag of medication prescribed for her fragile condition. For several months, she had been away in Switzerland's famed Rosenberg Clinic, recommended by her physician, Dr. Maria Rosenberg, whose family had founded the private facility. The clinic specialized in high-risk pregnancies. Caroline's journey had been lonely and perilous, all in hopes of preserving the life of her unborn child. Yet, as she inhaled the perfumed air, a mix of fresh roses and expensive cologne, Caroline's intuition screamed that something was wrong. She pictured her husband, Richard Rutherford, a powerful businessman adored by tabloids and envied by colleagues. For years, he had exuded the aura of a devoted partner, a charming philanthropist who donated generously to global charities. Their marriage had not always been smooth, but she believed they stood on solid ground. That certainty began to crumble when she heard an unfamiliar female voice echo from the upstairs study. A radiant, tinkling laughter, so casual, so relaxed, and definitely not hers. Every step Caroline took felt heavier than the last, as if the house itself conspired to trap her in heartbreak. Caroline ascended the winding staircase, her hand trembling over the golden railing. She could almost feel the presence of betrayal thick in the air. As she reached the landing, the hushed sound of intimate conversation filtered through the corridor. She paused outside the study door, ajar, just enough to reveal the silhouette of a woman leaning comfortably against Richard's leather office chair. Her name was Bianca Moretti, a fashion designer from Milan, rumored to have captured the hearts and fortunes of powerful men. Caroline recognized her immediately. Several months ago, at a Paris charity gala, Bianca had stood beside Richard for a photo that ended up on numerous gossip websites. Back then, Caroline dismissed the speculations, trusting that her husband's devotion was genuine, but the image before her spoke volumes. Richard sat with one hand resting intimately on Bianca's knee, while he chuckled at something she whispered into his ear. The ease with which he leaned in like they'd been lovers for centuries shattered every remaining doubt in Caroline's mind. She swayed, pressing a hand to her abdomen as a fresh wave of dizziness struck her. Her baby, this precious life she had fought so hard for, was now the only force tethering her to sanity. Gathering the fragments of her composure, Caroline took a shaky step into the study, knocking lightly on the door to announce her presence. In that instant, both Richard and Bianca turned toward her. Bianca's expression morphed from amusement to shock, and Richard's mouth opened in silent horror. Caroline's delicate features were a far cry from the confident socialite she had once been. Pale and exhausted, she carried a presence both heartbreaking and formidable. "Caroline," Richard managed, jumping to his feet. He rushed forward as if to assist her, but she extended a trembling hand to keep him at arm's length. "Is this how you welcome me home?" she asked, voice quivering. "I thought I would return to a devoted husband, not this spectacle." Bianca rose from the chair, adjusting her hair and smoothing her designer blouse. She stood tall, flashing a sly confidence, as though her presence was beyond question. Caroline noticed the subtle diamond bracelet on Bianca's wrist, one Caroline herself had admired once in a Tiffany's catalogue. The betrayal ran deep. Richard stammered an explanation, but the words sounded hollow. "I can explain things aren't what they look like," he said. The phrase was painfully cliché, and Caroline found herself biting her lip to hold back tears and rage. In the ensuing silence, the tension was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Bianca, with a flicker of brazen boldness, gently placed her hand on Richard's shoulder as if to signal her ownership. That single gesture ignited a fury within Caroline she never thought herself capable of feeling. Caroline recalled the many hours she had spent in the clinic bed, the lonely nights connected to the fourth drips, the sharp pangs of fear when she thought she might lose the pregnancy, and the glimmer of hope each time a nurse brought good news. She had endured all of it partly because she believed in a future of warmth, love, and protection with Richard by her side. That dream was now as fragile as shattered glass on marble floors. Suddenly, the opulent decor of the study mahogany bookshelves, vintage paintings, Persian rugs seemed to close in on her. She steadied herself, inhaling deeply to quell the wave of nausea rising from the pit of her stomach. With quiet determination, Caroline turned to Bianca first. "I suggest you leave," she said, her voice steady. Bianca's eyes narrowed, but she gathered her designer handbag and strutted toward the door, leaving behind a poisonous cloud of expensive perfume. Then Caroline faced her husband. "How long, Richard?" she asked, voice cracking. "How long have you been living in this lie?" Richard looked cornered, like a man who had just watched his world spin off its axis. "Caroline," he began, running a hand over his neatly trimmed hair, "this isn't what you think. Bianca was. She was just helping me manage some business deals in Milan. It's complicated." Caroline nearly laughed at the flimsy excuse. Their entire relationship felt like it was unraveling in slow motion. Slowly, she placed a hand on her abdomen, sensing the baby shift. A wave of protective anger fueled her words. "I risked my life for our child. I believed in the vow we made to face everything together. Meanwhile, you decided to play the devoted husband in public while you courted your mistress in private." The stinging bitterness in her voice was undeniable. Richard's eyes darted to the ground, unable to meet her gaze. While he might have been a titan in boardrooms, commanding deals worth millions, here he stood powerless. Caroline felt tears threaten, but she refused to break in front of him. She turned on her heels and walked out of the study, ignoring his pleas for her to stay. Each step down the hallway reverberated like a judge's gavel, sealing the first act of heartbreak in a drama far from its conclusion. Caroline locked herself in the master bedroom, the one she once shared with Richard, filled with memories of whispered laughter and early morning cuddles. Her reflection in the ornate mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, gaunt, pale, and hollow-eyed from months of medical stress. She recalled the day her obstetrician, Dr. David Macmillan, told her how precarious her pregnancy was. Complications threatened her health, and the baby was at constant risk. She flew to Switzerland under Dr. Macmillan's advice to seek specialized care, believing her husband would support her every step of the way. Yet, phone calls from Richard had grown increasingly rare over the last month, replaced by a parade of excuses. Sudden business trips, emergency board meetings, time zone conflicts. Caroline didn't want to be a suspicious wife who bombarded him with accusations, so she gave him space, trusting that his business empire demanded extraordinary attention. Now, that kindness felt like a cruel betrayal. She sank onto the bed, burying her face in a pillow to muffle sobs that shook her body. Through her tears, her resolve slowly solidified. She had to protect herself and her child. She refused to be an afterthought or a pawn in Richard's double life. The next morning, Caroline woke with swollen eyes and a dull ache throughout her body. She ventured downstairs to find the dining room table laden with her favorite breakfast items, fresh fruit, croissants, and a pot of chamomile tea steeping. A hopeful sign, perhaps an olive branch extended by Richard, yet he was nowhere to be seen. As she sipped her tea, she replayed the previous night's events in her mind. Every time she recalled Bianca's smug grin or the way Richard tried to stutter an explanation, anger boiled in her veins. But overshadowing that anger was a profound heartbreak. Her phone buzzed, pulling her back to the present. A text from her closest friend, Rebecca Smith, popped up. "How are you holding up? Heard you're back in town. Need to see you." Rebecca was one of the few people Caroline trusted wholeheartedly. In fact, she'd once confided to Rebecca about her fertility struggles before her pregnancy was finally confirmed. Caroline typed back, fingers trembling, "I'm not okay. Come as soon as you can." Moments later, she heard footsteps and turned to see Richard entering the dining room, looking determined. The tension between them was palpable. She straightened, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Richard approached cautiously, hands tucked into the pockets of his tailored trousers. His gaze searched Caroline's face, seeking any trace of warmth. Finding none, he exhaled a defeated sigh. "Caroline, can we talk, please?" She gestured for him to sit, her expression icy. "Go ahead. Talk." He lowered himself onto a chair across from her. She noticed how his usually confident posture was slumped. "I won't insult your intelligence by claiming there's nothing between Bianca and me. But it started. It started when the loneliness got to me." Caroline's heart clenched. "Loneliness? Do you realize how lonely I was in that hospital? Day after day, with doctors warning me I could lose this baby at any time. All I had was faith that you were my anchor, my reason to hold on." Richard swallowed hard. "I know," he said, voice shaking. "I failed you. I got caught up in the press, the company, in temptations. But I never wanted to replace you or our child." "Don't," Caroline snapped, cutting him off. "I'm not your consolation prize." He tried to reach for her hand, but she drew back. The silence that followed spoke more truth than any string of apologies ever could. Before Richard could voice another excuse, the doorbell rang. Caroline stood up, grateful for the interruption. She walked to the foyer, opening the grand doors to find Rebecca Smith. Her auburn hair was pulled into a messy bun, and concern etched lines across her usually cheerful face. Without a word, Caroline threw her arms around her friend, letting out a sob she had fought to contain in front of Richard. Once Rebecca was inside, Caroline led her to a quieter sitting room, away from Richard's piercing stare. The instant they settled on a plush velvet sofa, Caroline poured out the story of her discovery, the mistress, the betrayal, her heartbreak. Rebecca's eyes blazed with fury on Caroline's behalf. "I can't believe he'd do this, especially after everything you've gone through for this baby," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "You have legal rights, Caroline. Your health and your baby's health come first. Have you considered what you're going to do next?" Caroline wiped her eyes. She'd always admired Rebecca's level-headedness. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I can't just forgive and pretend nothing happened. But leaving him, that's a massive decision, with consequences for me and for my child." Caroline's dilemma weighed heavily. She was married to a man whose wealth and connections stretched across continents. The Rutherford name carried influence that could charm politicians and quiet tabloids. Yet behind the glamorous facade lay a marriage stained by infidelity. Rebecca gently placed a hand over Caroline's. "No one can decide for you, but I'm here for whatever you choose. You deserve better than this. Your baby deserves better." Caroline nodded, feeling a swirl of gratitude and despair. Outside the window, she noticed Richard pacing by the gardens, speaking tersely into his phone. Probably damage control, she thought bitterly, either for business deals or for ensuring that rumors about Bianca and him didn't reach the press. A memory flashed in Caroline's mind, the day she and Richard married in a lavish ceremony at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. Their families beamed as they exchanged vows. Afterward, they danced under glittering chandeliers, believing they were a pair destined for greatness. Now, the vow for better or worse sounded like a sad echo. At last, Caroline squeezed Rebecca's hand. "I need to meet with a lawyer," she said. The words tasted foreign and terrifying on her tongue, but in that moment she felt it was the right step towards self-preservation. Later that afternoon, Caroline slipped away from the mansion under the pretense of visiting her obstetrician. Rebecca had arranged a discreet meeting with James Caldwell, a respected family lawyer who had guided many high-profile clients through divorces. Caroline felt a pang of anxiety as her driver navigated the city streets. This was a road she never imagined herself traveling. At Caldwell's office, a sleek downtown high-rise, Caroline was ushered into a conference room with plush chairs and modern art on the walls. James, an older gentleman with a kind face, greeted her warmly. She explained her situation in a trembling voice, from the precarious pregnancy to the discovery of Richard's affair. James listened with professional empathy, taking notes. "Given Richard's substantial assets and the fact that you've sacrificed significantly for your pregnancy," he said, "you have considerable legal standing. Moreover, if he's been openly consorting with Bianca, that's strong evidence of marital misconduct." Caroline swallowed. "I never wanted it to come to this. All I ever wanted was a loving family. But now I have to protect myself, my baby." James nodded. "I understand. The next step, if you choose it, is to separate legally or physically. We can also file for full spousal and child support." Caroline nodded uncertainly, feeling her life pivot on this decision. When Caroline returned to the mansion, she found Richard waiting in the foyer, wearing a stormy expression. He must have received some hint of her whereabouts, or guessed it. "Where were you?" he demanded, his voice hollow. She set her purse on a console table with deliberate slowness. "I had an appointment," she replied calmly, avoiding his eyes. "An appointment with Dr. Macmillan?" he pressed. "I'll remind you, I can reach his office with a single call." Caroline's lips tightened into a thin line. She had rarely seen him like this, panicked, desperate for control. "No, it wasn't Dr. Macmillan. And I don't have to disclose my every move to you, not anymore." Richard drew closer, his voice lowering. "Caroline, don't push me away. I told you I made a mistake. I'm willing to fix it, but you have to talk to me." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Talk to you? The time for talking was when I was in Switzerland, calling you late at night, praying you'd pick up the phone so I wouldn't feel alone. You ignored me. Now you're worried about the fallout. Don't pretend this is about me." She brushed past him, heading upstairs with her heart pounding. She knew each step she took toward independence would heighten Richard's desperation and possibly his manipulative tactics. That evening, Rebecca returned, offering her unwavering support. Together, they packed a few of Caroline's essentials into a small suitcase. She intended to move into a penthouse suite that Rebecca had arranged through a friend of hers, Melissa Caldwell, James Caldwell's daughter, who managed luxury properties. This suite would grant Caroline some privacy away from the prying eyes of staff, neighbors, and most importantly, Richard. Caroline had no illusions about how Richard would react when he discovered her plan to leave. She felt a pang of sadness at the thought of abandoning the home she'd decorated and cherished. But the constant sting of betrayal within those walls was too heavy a burden. As she was about to close the suitcase, she caught sight of her wedding photos displayed on the nightstand. She paused, staring at the beaming faces of two people who believed in forever. Quietly, she slipped the photo from its frame and set it aside. Part of her wanted to tear it to shreds, but another part still clung to the hope of preserving memories for her child's sake, if nothing else, a record of a time when love had been pure. Rebecca guided her downstairs as discreetly as possible. The car waited, engine humming, ready to whisk Caroline into an uncertain new chapter. Richard intercepted them at the front door. His normally composed demeanor cracked, revealing raw desperation. "Caroline, please," he pleaded, his voice straining to remain calm. "We can't fix this if you leave." Caroline paused, her breath hitching. "You made your choices," she said. "This is the consequence." She motioned for Rebecca to usher her quickly out the door. The driver secured her suitcase, and Caroline slid into the car's back seat. As it rolled away, she looked out the window to see Richard standing on the driveway, hands clenched into fists of frustration. During the drive to the penthouse, Caroline ran through a barrage of emotions: fear, sorrow, anger, and oddly relief. Despite the heartbreak, there was a sense of autonomy in finally standing up for herself. They arrived at a sleek high rise overlooking Central Park. The doorman greeted them politely, and soon Caroline was stepping into a furnished penthouse that exuded contemporary elegance, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist decor, and the hush of privacy she so desperately needed. She took a seat on the plush sofa, letting out a long exhale. Rebecca squeezed her hand. "You're doing the right thing. Richard needs to understand the gravity of what he's done." Caroline nodded, feeling the first flickers of hope in the midst of overwhelming uncertainty. Days turned into a tense routine. Caroline spent her mornings at prenatal checkups with Dr. Macmillan, who continued to monitor her health meticulously. Even though the immediate risks had eased somewhat, stress was the last thing her delicate condition needed. Yet each day brought new challenges: calls from Richard, unanswered texts, bouquets of flowers delivered to the penthouse in an attempt to win her back. Some nights, Caroline couldn't sleep. She'd pace across the penthouse's living room, gazing out at the glittering city lights, tears brimming over. She felt the baby move, a soft flutter that reminded her of the life she needed to protect. Though she still wore her wedding ring, the cool metal felt like a chain, binding her to a reality that no longer existed. Word of the scandal slowly leaked into social circles. A few tabloids printed vague hints about trouble in the Rutherford marriage. Caroline's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from acquaintances feigning concern or fishing for gossip. She remained resolute in her silence, determined to keep her personal war out of the public eye as much as possible. Rebecca, unwavering in her role as confidant, urged Caroline to stay focused on her health and the future. "You're stronger than you realize," she would say. One day at a time. Late one afternoon, Caroline visited the Rutherfords' family lawyer, separate from James Caldwell, to discuss her legal standing as the spouse of a high-profile billionaire. This lawyer, Penelope Addison, had known Caroline since the early days of her marriage to Richard. When Caroline explained the situation, Penelope's kind eyes clouded with sadness. "Caroline, the first sorry you're facing this," Penelope said. "Richard is a powerful man, but so are you in this scenario. You hold the moral high ground, and the courts would favor you strongly if it comes to custody or divorce proceedings." Caroline wrapped her arms protectively around her growing belly. "I just want to ensure my child won't suffer from any financial or legal battles. I've seen too many stories of children caught in the crossfire." Penelope offered a reassuring smile. "Richard is many things, but he adores his family name and legacy. He won't want to be known as the father who abandoned his own child. Regardless, we'll secure the necessary legal protections." Walking out of Penelope's office, Caroline felt an unexpected surge of courage. For so long, she had relied on the identity of being Richard's wife. Now, she was discovering her own strength as a mother determined to shield her child from the storm. Richard Rutherford's carefully curated world was beginning to crack under the weight of mounting rumors and personal guilt. Whispers of his affair with Bianca Moretti had leaked far enough to reach the Rutherford Corporation's board of directors, an elite group known for its rigorous scrutiny of any scandal threatening the family empire. A special meeting was called, during which several board members quietly voiced concerns about the detrimental effects of such negative publicity on investor confidence and stock performance. Others, more discreet but equally alarmed, wondered if Richard's new distractions were undermining his usual sharpness in steering the company's strategic direction. Behind the polished conference table and the sleek city views, Richard sat, perspiration gathering at his collar. He feigned composure, weaving half-truths about a harmless misunderstanding. Yet as he glanced from one stern face to another, the reality of his double life pressed upon him like a vice. He left the meeting with a sense of dread he had not felt before, an uneasy mix of fear that Bianca's name was on everyone's lips, and an even deeper concern about losing control. Returning to his office, Richard sank into his leather chair and stared at the framed family photograph on his desk. Caroline's gentle smile and bright eyes seemed to accuse him of recklessness. Guilt over betraying her mixed with anger at her sudden decision to separate from him. In fleeting moments of honesty, he acknowledged that he had allowed himself to be seduced by Bianca's flattery, the glamorous parties, and the thrill of stepping outside his predictable marriage. But he had never believed Caroline would discover the affair so directly, let alone walk out. Meanwhile, Bianca felt emboldened by the newfound spotlight. With Caroline gone, she assumed she would occupy a more significant role in Richard's life. She demanded invitations to lavish galas, charity auctions, and investors' dinners, flaunting designer gowns and clutching his arm possessively for every camera. The press, hungry for salacious headlines, began describing them as an emerging power couple. Magazine spreads painted Bianca as a vibrant fashion muse and Richard as her wealthy benefactor. But beneath the glossy surface, tension simmered. Each time a magazine or blog speculated about his crumbling marriage, Richard was haunted by the realization that he had become a man he despised, someone who had traded genuine devotion for fleeting excitement. Late at night, alone in his penthouse study, he scrolled through old text messages and photographs, impulsively typing apologies to Caroline. More often than not, she left them unanswered. A silence that spoke volumes of her pain and served as a stark reminder of his own profound mistakes. Caroline settled uneasily into her temporary home, the quiet penthouse she had rented to escape both the suffocating walls of the Rutherford mansion and the relentless media spotlight. Although the space offered privacy, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a serene view of the city skyline, it was impossible to shut out the noise of gossip swirling around her life. News outlets and social media platforms buzzed with speculation about Richard's affair, Bianca's brazen public appearances, and the fate of Caroline's marriage. Whenever Caroline ventured outside, photographers jockeyed for position in the lobby, hoping to capture a single revealing image or coax a comment from her. Under this pressure, Caroline's emotional and physical health wavered. Sleep became elusive, haunted by nightmares in which she relived the moment of discovering her husband's betrayal. Her once healthy appetite shrank, replaced by waves of nausea that often had little to do with her pregnancy and everything to do with her turmoil. Rebecca, her ever-loyal friend, visited daily. She fretted over Caroline's pallor and insisted that she see a therapist for the trauma. Initially hesitant, Caroline relented. She knew deep down that she could no longer process the pain alone. Dr. Lucinda Delgado, a soft-spoken woman with warm, empathetic eyes, specialized in helping high-profile clients navigate personal crises. The first session began with a polite exchange, then quickly delved into Caroline's innermost feelings, fear for her baby's future, a sense of betrayal so deep it felt physical, and a simmering anger at Richard, though part of her still remembered the man she had loved. Dr. Delgado's questions were gentle, yet probing, guiding Caroline to explore her own emotional needs. Caroline had never considered just how much she had sacrificed for Richard's demanding lifestyle. Time and again, she had prioritized his career ambitions over her own passions, believing that devotion was the cornerstone of a strong marriage. When the session ended, Caroline felt exhausted but also oddly liberated. She realized healing would be neither quick nor straightforward. Nonetheless, she walked out of Dr. Delgado's office with a faint spark of hope. Perhaps she could piece her life back together, not by returning to the way things were, but by forging a new path shaped by self-respect and self-awareness. Day by day, she resolved to untangle her identity from Richard's powerful shadow, focusing instead on nurturing the future growing inside her. Even though she remained uncertain about what lay ahead, this first step toward healing felt like choosing to breathe again after far too long. Caroline's journey took an unexpected turn one sunny morning when she felt a sharp pain radiate through her abdomen. Panic swelled. She immediately called Dr. Macmillan, who advised her to head to the hospital. Rebecca rushed to drive her, weaving through Manhattan traffic with knuckles white on the steering wheel. At the emergency room, Caroline was admitted for observation. Tests revealed elevated stress levels and potential complications with her blood pressure. Dr. Macmillan warned that if she didn't find a way to reduce the strain, it could endanger her and the baby. The possibility of preterm labor loomed a terrifying reminder of how vulnerable life could be. News of Caroline's hospital visit reached Richard in a matter of hours. He abandoned his afternoon meetings and dashed to her bedside, ignoring the suspicious looks from staff and bystanders. When he arrived, he found Caroline resting, pale and exhausted, and the fourth drip in her arm. Hesitantly, he approached, not sure if she would reject him. Caroline opened her eyes, meeting his anxious gaze. She had no energy to argue or berate him. In that moment, the father of her child was there, and she found a tiny shred of comfort in not being completely alone. Caroline's hospital stay stretched into several days. Under Dr. Macmillan's supervision, her condition stabilized, but she was advised to remain calm and well-rested. An uneasy truce formed between her and Richard. He lingered in the hospital room, quietly helping with small tasks, adjusting pillows, ensuring her meal tray was properly placed, fetching water. They spoke little of their marital crisis. The tension was still thick, but an unspoken compassion for the baby united them in that sterile environment. Bianca, however, was far from pleased. She bombarded Richard's phone with calls and texts, demanding to know why he had vanished and insinuating that Caroline was manipulating him. Torn between guilt and obligations, Richard mostly ignored Bianca's tirades, focusing on Caroline and the precarious health of their unborn child. One afternoon, as Caroline dozed, Richard stepped outside to take a call from the board of directors. That's when Bianca unexpectedly appeared, finding him in the hospital corridor. She wore a glamorous outfit that clashed with the austere surroundings, her face twisted in jealousy. "So this is where you've been hiding," she hissed. "I deserve answers, Richard. Don't forget our plans." His jaw tightened. For the first time, he felt annoyed by her demands. "Bianca, not now. Caroline is pregnant with my child, and she's in danger. Show some decency." Her eyes flared. The confrontation marked a turning point in their illicit relationship, a glimmer that the affair's shimmering allure was beginning to tarnish. Inside the hospital room, Caroline stirred awake to find Richard gone and no sign of a nurse. Confusion and anxiety spiked her heart rate. She carefully sat up, pressing the call button. Moments later, a nurse checked her vitals, offering reassurances that her husband had stepped out momentarily. Exhaustion washed over Caroline. She yearned for the life she once dreamed of, a devoted husband, a stable home, and the excitement of awaiting their child. Instead, everything felt marred by betrayal, mistrust, and the public spectacle brewing outside these walls. The ring on her finger felt heavier than ever, a symbol of vows unkept. When Richard finally returned, Caroline studied the guilt etched across his face. "Where did you go?" she asked softly. "Just outside to take a call," he replied, voice subdued. "How are you feeling?" She sighed, resting her head against the pillow. "Tired." An awkward silence followed. Caroline mustered the courage to meet his gaze. "Richard, I don't have the strength to fight right now. The baby's health is paramount. We can't keep allowing our bitterness to feed this storm." He nodded, contrite. "You're right. Let's focus on the baby first." In that moment, a fragile ceasefire began, though old wounds still burned beneath the surface. After a week, Caroline was discharged from the hospital with strict orders to avoid stress. Richard insisted she stay at the mansion, arguing that she'd have better access to round-the-clock care and more space to relax. Though initially hesitant, Caroline conceded for the baby's sake on the condition that Bianca was never to set foot on the property again. Entering the mansion felt surreal. The same grand foyer, the same glittering chandelier, now overshadowed by memories of betrayal. Yet, the staff hurried to accommodate her, preparing healthy meals and a serene atmosphere. Richard turned an empty guest suite into a private retreat for Caroline, offering her distance from the master bedroom that held too many painful reminders. At first, conversation between them was limited to mundane updates, meal preferences, doctor appointments, business headlines. Each day, they navigated a labyrinth of tension, uncertain how to balance their shared love for the baby with their fractured relationship. Caroline often retreated to a sun-drenched alcove overlooking the gardens, reading parenting books or journaling her tangled emotions. Richard tried in small ways to make amends, fresh flowers in her room, a gentle inquiry about her health, or picking up a parenting magazine left on a table, but no apology could erase the past. Caroline remained cautious, heart barricaded behind the fortress of heartbreak. Time moved forward, and Caroline entered her 7th month of pregnancy. The more her belly grew, the more she realized how much her life had changed since that first moment she found Richard with Bianca. Yet among the turmoil, subtle shifts began to shape their new normal. On a few occasions, Richard accompanied her to Dr. Macmillan's appointments. He asked questions about the baby's progress, listened carefully to instructions, and even expressed wonder at hearing the baby's heartbeat, a sound that softened some of Caroline's guardedness. Word from the outside world was not so gentle. Bianca's modeling contract with a luxury brand skyrocketed her visibility. She was often photographed partying in Monaco or dining in exclusive restaurants, sometimes alluding to the powerful man who changed her life. Insinuations in tabloids hinted that she expected Richard to bankroll her glamorous lifestyle. Yet, Richard visibly began withdrawing from her, diverting his energy into damage control and his impending fatherhood. Caroline observed these changes with cautious hope. Each small act of responsibility from Richard was a reminder of the man she once loved. Still, trust remained elusive. Could she ever forgive him? If so, would that forgiveness be genuine or merely a compromise for the sake of their child? When Caroline reached her 8th month, Dr. Macmillan recommended she remain on partial bed rest to reduce the risk of premature labor. Confined to her suite, she found solace in planning the nursery. Despite the uncertainty, she wanted her child's room to be a haven of warmth. Soft pastel walls, plush toys, and a vintage rocking chair gifted by her mother. She entrusted the staff to bring her swatches of fabric, pictures of cribs, and adorable baby outfits. One day, while she was reviewing a baby journal, Richard knocked and entered softly. He carried a small box wrapped in silver paper. "I wanted to give you this," he said, setting the box beside her on the bed. Inside was a delicate gold locket engraved with the initials CR, and inside, a place for a photograph of their baby. Caroline pressed her lips together, tears threatening. It was a thoughtful gesture, reminiscent of the considerate Richard she had once cherished. She looked up at him. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "It's the least I can do." For a moment, they lingered there in tentative tranquility, yet neither dared to address the looming question: could their relationship ever be salvaged? Caroline was resting in the upstairs sitting room, trying to calm her breathing after yet another uncomfortable round of Braxton Hicks contractions. Although Dr. Macmillan had assured her these sporadic tightenings were natural, the stress of her deteriorating marriage was a weight she felt in every tendon and muscle. At 8 months pregnant, she had little energy to spare, yet she remained vigilant, listening for any sound that might herald more drama in the once peaceful mansion. A sudden commotion in the foyer jolted Caroline from her thoughts. Alarmed, she rose carefully, one hand supporting the small of her back while the other protected her belly. She moved toward the sweeping staircase, her steps slow but resolute. Below her, she spotted Bianca Moretti in a stylish yet overly dramatic coat, gesticulating wildly as she confronted Richard. The voices echoed across the high ceilings, their fury palpable. From her vantage point on the stairs, Caroline watched Richard's posture tense. His voice, usually controlled and confident, was taut with anger. "Bianca, you can't just barge in here," he snapped, his attempt at maintaining composure fraying at the edges. Bianca's eyes flared at Caroline's movement. Spotting her rival at the top of the staircase, she directed an icy sneer upward. "Oh, the invalid wife decides to join us," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Congratulate yourself, Caroline. You've done an excellent job chaining Richard to you by waving your pregnancy around." A surge of indignation washed over Caroline. She placed one hand protectively on her abdomen, feeling the baby shift in response to her elevated heartbeat. "If you think this child is a ploy, you know nothing about me," she shot back, trying to keep her voice steady despite the anger roiling inside. "I would have walked away long ago if it weren't for my unborn daughter and the hope that Richard might learn from his mistakes." Bianca's sharp laugh reverberated off the marble floors. Her gaze flicked over Richard with a dangerous glint, as though she might lash out at him next. Sensing the confrontation escalating, he gestured for the security staff to intervene. 2 uniformed men hurried to Bianca's side, gently but firmly guiding her toward the door. She resisted at first, spewing final threats over her shoulder. "You'll regret humiliating me like this," she hissed, her voice echoing in the cavernous entryway. "Mark my words, both of you will pay." The heavy wooden doors slammed shut. In the silence that followed, Caroline stood trembling at the top of the stairs. She looked down at Richard, who stared at the closed doors with a mixture of anger and dread. The realization sank in that any fragile stability they had rebuilt could shatter in an instant. Caroline pressed her hand against her belly once more, silently praying that the stress would not harm her baby or what little hope remained for her family's future. The hours following Bianca's outburst seemed to stretch into days, each moment steeped in lingering tension. Caroline found herself checking every locked door and window, worrying that Bianca might actually attempt some form of revenge. She tried to distract herself by reading baby books or browsing through nursery catalogues, but her thoughts inevitably drifted to the scene in the foyer, Bianca's sneer, her poisonous words, and the way Richard had struggled to maintain control. Richard, for his part, was on constant edge. He fielded calls from his security team, his legal advisors, and various staff members, all concerned about Bianca's threats. More than once, Caroline overheard hushed conversations behind closed doors, Richard's voice low and urgent. Whenever he emerged, he did his best to appear calm, speaking gently to Caroline about the baby and offering to bring her tea or snacks. Yet there was a forced politeness between them, like two people occupying adjacent rooms in a house of cards, afraid a single misstep would bring everything crashing down. One cool morning, Caroline awoke early, plagued by restless sleep and a persistent ache in her lower back. She ventured to the dining room to find Richard already seated, a porcelain teapot steaming in front of him. He stood the moment she entered, pulling out a chair in a halting gesture of courtesy. She sat without a word, the tension in the air thick as fog. After a few sips of tea, Richard cleared his throat. "Caroline, we need to talk about us. We can't keep dancing around this." With the baby coming so soon, he hesitated, pressing his palms together in an attempt to steady himself. "I need to know if there's a chance for us to rebuild what we had, or if you'd prefer we finalize a separation." Caroline's hand trembled slightly, the teacup rattling against its saucer. She took a breath, steadying her voice. "I'm still so angry," she admitted, staring into the swirl of tea. "Every time I think of what happened, the lies, the loneliness, it hurts more than I can put into words." Richard swallowed hard, guilt evident in his eyes. "I understand," he said quietly. "I can't change the past, but I want to be here for you and for our daughter. I want to do better, if you'll let me." A long pause followed, filled only by the hum of the central heating. Finally, Caroline placed the cup down. "I can't make any promises," she whispered. "I won't stay married to you just for appearances or because of the baby. If I find I can't forgive, I'll leave after she's born. My peace of mind and my daughter's future matter more than holding on to a broken relationship." Richard nodded, his face etched with regret. Even so, a faint glimmer of hope passed between them, the smallest sign that perhaps time could mend some wounds. He reached out his hand, hesitating. After a moment, Caroline allowed her fingers to intertwine with his. Their joined hands didn't erase the past, but it formed a fragile bridge across the gulf of hurt, a sign that, however uncertain, the future might hold a chance for healing. The next few days were fraught with anxiety. Caroline battled a constant tightness in her chest, wondering if Bianca would follow through on her threats. Richard did his best to soothe her concerns, reassuring her that he had powerful legal teams and public relations experts to handle any smear campaign. Yet an unspoken heaviness pervaded the mansion. One morning, over breakfast, Richard broached a topic they'd both been avoiding. "Caroline, we need to talk about whether we can find a path forward, or if you'd prefer to finalize a separation." Caroline stared at the untouched tea in her cup. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Every time I think of what you did, of how you left me alone when I needed you most, it kills me." He nodded, pain flickering in his eyes. "I understand. I'd do anything to change the past, but I can't. All I can offer is the present, to be here for you, for our child, and try to mend what I broke." She inhaled slowly, feeling her pulse in her temples. "We'll have to see. I won't force this marriage for appearances. If I decide I can't forgive, I'll leave after the baby is born." Richard's shoulders sagged with the weight of her words. He silently reached for her hand, and she allowed it tentatively, a fragile bridge spanning a chasm of hurt. As Caroline approached her 9th month of pregnancy, every day felt like teetering on a knife's edge. She walked carefully through the mansion's hallways, her belly leading the way, occasionally resting in a plush lounge whenever the fatigue overwhelmed her. Richard shadowed her with concern, though he kept a respectful distance, aware that trust could not be repaired overnight. Tabloids erupted again after Bianca Moretti made statements implying a secret child scandal, insinuating she might have been pregnant with Richard's baby before an alleged miscarriage. There was no evidence, but the headline was salacious enough to feed gossip columns. Caroline felt her blood pressure surge at the suggestion. Dr. Delgado coached her on coping strategies, emphasizing calm breathing and positive affirmations. Richard's crisis management team went into overdrive, threatening legal action against any publication spreading the unverified rumor. For Caroline, it was a draining spectacle. Each new day brought another wave of chaos. Yet, in the midst of the storm, something curious happened. She and Richard began to share quiet moments that felt almost intimate. They'd watch the news together, discuss baby names, even exchange faint smiles when the baby kicked. Though pain still lurked beneath every interaction, so did the faint glimmer of a shared future. The climax arrived in the early hours of a rainy morning. Caroline woke to persistent contractions, the pain gripping her lower abdomen like a vice. She called for Richard, who sprang into action, helping her into the car. The drive to the hospital was tense, each contraction intensifying as thunder rumbled in the distance. In the maternity ward, Dr. Macmillan and a team of nurses quickly surrounded her. Machines beeped, monitors flickered, and Caroline tried to steady her breath. Richard hovered, holding her hand with an intensity she hadn't felt in a long time. Their gazes locked during a particularly fierce contraction, and she saw genuine fear and love reflected in his eyes. For that moment, everything else, Bianca, scandals, betrayal, fell away, overshadowed by the miracle of life they were about to welcome. Hours later, a piercing cry rang through the delivery room. A baby girl, tiny and wailing with robust lungs, was placed gently in Caroline's arms. Exhausted tears streamed down Caroline's cheeks, and Richard's eyes glistened with raw emotion. They marveled together at their daughter's delicate fingers and trembling lips. In that moment, amid the chaos of beeping monitors and exhausted relief, a fragile sense of unity took hold. Caroline cradled her newborn daughter, marveling at the swirl of soft, dark hair that crowned the baby's head. Emotions flooded her, joy, relief, and a tidal wave of protectiveness. Richard pressed a gentle kiss to both Caroline's forehead and the baby's tiny hand, tears slipping down his cheeks. It was the first time she had seen him cry. In the days that followed, the magnitude of their child's arrival overshadowed much of the bitterness. Caroline remained cautious, aware that forgiveness wasn't a switch to be flicked on. But as she watched Richard tenderly feed their baby, read her bedtime stories, and hum lullabies in the quiet of the night, she saw glimpses of the man she once adored. Their marriage was far from healed. Trust would require consistent effort and unwavering honesty. But a new possibility emerged, the hope of rebuilding. If they chose to attempt that journey, they would do so with eyes wide open, acknowledging the fragility of what they'd nearly lost. And yet, if they decided otherwise, if the wounds ran too deep, they now had a precious daughter to unite them in a different way, as co-parents forging a new path. For Caroline Rutherford, returning from the hospital had been the start of a harshly different life than she imagined. But from those shattered pieces, she realized she had the chance to carve out a future that was truly hers, even if it meant walking away from a millionaire's mansion and forging her own, more authentic life. And there you have it, a saga of love, betrayal, heartbreak, and an unexpected glimmer of redemption. Caroline, once a trusting wife fighting for her unborn child's survival, found the strength to confront a painful reality that the man she married was not the man she believed him to be. In the end, she refused to sacrifice her dignity or the well-being of her newborn daughter. Through fierce determination, honest self-reflection, and the unwavering support of true friends, Caroline discovered that life does not end with betrayal. Instead, it can be the catalyst for a bold new beginning, one where she holds the power to choose her path. If this dramatic journey stirred your emotions and kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected for more riveting stories. Your support helps bring more real-life drama and inspiration straight to you.